My phone rang at 2:47 in the afternoon. It was my wife. And she only calls me at work for two reasons: something good or something bad. The second I heard her breathing, I knew exactly which one this was. She didn't even say hello. She just said, "There are two police officers standing in our driveway right now." I didn't say anything for a second. Just sat there with the phone pressed to my ear. "Why?" I asked. "The woman from down the street. She called them on me." I put my pen down slowly, stood up from my desk, walked to my office window, and I just stood there looking out at nothing for about 5 full seconds while my brain processed what she had just told me. See, the neighbor had been making our lives difficult for months. Little things, petty things. HOA complaints about our trash cans, handwritten notes about our lawn, letters about our porch light. Every single grievance went straight to an authority rather than to our front door like a normal human being. But today, she went further. Today, she picked up the phone and called law enforcement on my wife, a woman who was doing absolutely nothing wrong in front of her own home. I told my wife to stay outside, stay calm, and not say another word. Then I grabbed my jacket. Now I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened next. Something that the neighbor had no way of knowing. Something that completely changes every single part of this story. She had just called the police. On the wife of the chief of police. Let me back up. Because this didn't start with police cruisers in my driveway. It started with a note. We had moved into the neighborhood about 5 months before all this happened. Nice area. Quiet street. We were genuinely excited about the house. First week in, we're still unpacking boxes, and there's a folded piece of paper tucked into our mailbox. No envelope. No name. Just a note. It said our recycling bin was 6 inches too close to the sidewalk and that the HOA guidelines required it to be placed further back. 6 inches. Someone had actually measured it. I laughed it off. My wife laughed it off. We moved the bin. 2 weeks later, another note. This time about our grass. Apparently, it was slightly over the HOA's maximum allowed height. We had literally just moved in and hadn't found a lawn service yet. Normal life stuff. But this woman, our neighbor 3 houses down, had already filed a formal written complaint with the HOA board before she ever once considered walking over and introducing herself. That was how she operated. No conversation. No courtesy. Straight to the authorities every single time. Over the next 3 months, it was one thing after another. Our porch light. A guest's car parked slightly over the driveway edge. A seasonal wreath my wife hung on the front door that was apparently the wrong color for the community guidelines. Every single complaint went through official channels, and every single time, we complied. We adjusted. We let it go. But something was building, quietly, underneath all that patience. And on that Wednesday afternoon, she finally pushed too far. I pulled onto our street and saw the cruisers from half a block away. My wife was standing on the front lawn with her arms wrapped around herself. Not because she was cold, just that thing people do when they feel cornered and don't know what to do with their hands. One officer was talking to her. The other was standing near the curb writing something down. And there she was, the neighbor, standing at the edge of her own yard 3 houses down, watching the whole thing with this look on her face like she was satisfied, like she had accomplished something. I parked, got out, walked toward my wife first. The officer talking to her looked up at me and held a hand out. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay back while we..." I reached into my jacket and showed him my credentials. The change in his face happened in about half a second. His hand came down. He straightened up slightly, and he said, very quietly, "Chief, we didn't know this was your residence, sir." "I know you didn't," I said. "Tell me exactly what the complaint was." He explained it. The neighbor had called and reported a vehicle parked in a way that was supposedly blocking visibility at the corner. My wife's car, parked in front of our own house on a public street, completely legally, not blocking anything. They had responded because they had to. Protocol. I understood that. These were my guys. They were just doing their jobs. But the woman who made that call, she wasn't done being surprised yet, because she still hadn't noticed what was on my jacket. I walked over to the second officer and told him they were free to go. No report needed. He nodded, said yes, sir, and within 2 minutes both cruisers were pulling away from the curb. Just like that. Gone. My wife exhaled next to me. I put my hand on her shoulder and told her to go inside. Get some water. I'd be in shortly. She looked at me for a second, that look she gives me when she's not sure if I'm okay, and then she went in. I turned around. The neighbor was still standing at the edge of her yard, but something had changed in her posture. The satisfaction she had been wearing on her face 10 minutes ago was completely gone. She was watching the police cars leave, watching them not take my wife away, watching them treat me like what I actually am. She hadn't figured it out yet. Not completely. But doubt was creeping in. I walked toward her, slowly, not aggressively. Just walked over like a normal neighbor having a normal conversation on a normal afternoon. I stopped about 6 feet away from her and just looked at her for a moment without saying anything. Then I said, "I don't think we've ever formally introduced ourselves. I'm the chief of police for this county." She blinked, opened her mouth, closed it. "Every complaint you've filed, every call you've made, every officer who has responded to this address, they all work for me." She went completely white. I let that sit there in the air between us for a few seconds. Then I said, "We need to have a real conversation about all of it." She tried to speak, actually tried to form words. Nothing came out. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. I just stood there on the sidewalk in front of her yard and laid it all out. Every complaint, every note, every officer she had pulled away from actual emergencies to come measure how far our trash can was from the curb. I had looked up every single report filed against our address going back 4 months, all of them traced back to her. I told her that filing false or exaggerated police reports is not a neighborhood hobby. It is a misuse of emergency services, and that every call she made had been logged, documented, and was now sitting in a file with her name on it. She finally found her voice, started saying it was all within her rights, that she was just following HOA guidelines, that she had no idea who we were. I let her finish. Then I said, "The HOA board meets Thursday. I've already requested time to speak. Every complaint you filed with the HOA, with the department, will be reviewed, formally." Her face just fell. The HOA meeting happened 2 days later. I walked in full uniform, sat down, and calmly presented a 4-month paper trail of targeted, bad faith complaints against a single household. The board voted that same night to issue her a formal warning and place her complaints under review. She hasn't filed a single complaint since. Not one note. Not one call. My wife parks wherever she wants. And every morning when I back out of my driveway and see that house 3 doors down, I think about how some people forget that actions have consequences. Every single time.